A dedicated doctor discovers that healing goes beyond medicine when he falls deeply in love with a patient whose strength and resilience challenge everything he thought about life, love, and hope. He saved lives by the dozens every day, but his eyes never lingered longer than necessary. To him, patients were conditions, cases, problems to solve, not stories, not souls. Then came Ruby. They wheeled her in at midnight, sweat clinging to her skin, her breath shallow yet stubborn. She looked as though her body was surrendering, but her eyes refused to bow. Elias pressed his stethoscope against her chest, muttering orders to the nurses, his tone clipped, mechanical. But she wasn't like the others. Instead of fading into weakness, she lifted her gaze, met his, and whispered, "Don't treat me like I'm already gone." The words hit him harder than the alarms blaring around them. Hours passed. For drips, scans, oxygen tubes. Through it all, Ruby fought back with a strange fire, asking questions, teasing the nurses, refusing to let silence swallow her. Elias caught himself watching her more than the monitors. In the brief stillness of a treatment pause, when the world slowed, she cracked a small smile. Fragile, fleeting, but real. He hadn't seen a patient smile like that in years. Something stirred in him, something dangerous. Curiosity. Their conversations started clinical. Symptoms. Medical history. Dosages. But every answer from her carried a story. She spoke of the husband she lost too young, the child she never got to raise, the night she learned to survive alone. "I'm not here to be pitied," she said, her voice breaking but fierce. "I'm here because I still want to live. I still want to feel something." Elias felt the ground shift beneath his carefully constructed walls. He reminded himself of the rules: doctors don't feel. Doctors don't get attached. Yet, every time Ruby met his gaze, every time she defied her pain with stubborn resilience, he found himself fighting battles that had nothing to do with medicine. In her weakness, she was stronger than anyone he'd ever known. In his strength, he was emptier than he dared admit. And somewhere between those truths, a connection sparked, unspoken, forbidden, undeniable. When he returned to check on her, she was awake, her face pale yet her eyes bright. "You look tired, doctor," she teased, voice weak but playful. He frowned, caught off guard. "That's not your concern." "And yet," she whispered, tilting her head, "I think you need saving more than I do." The words lodged in his chest like a truth he never asked for. Elias wanted to correct her, to remind her that his role was savior, not the saved. But instead, silence fell between them, a silence charged with something unspeakable. He studied her face, the lines of exhaustion, the tremor of her breath. She should have looked broken. Instead, she looked alive in a way he hadn't seen in years. As dawn painted the ER windows, Ruby's condition grew worse. Her breathing faltered, alarms rang out, and Elias moved swiftly, barking orders, his hands steady but his heart racing. For the first time in years, fear clawed at him, not fear of failure, but fear of losing her. When the crisis passed and she stabilized, she reached for his hand, her fingers trembling against his. "Don't be afraid for me," she said, her voice hoarse but certain. "I've lived through worse storms than this. I'm not done yet." Elias froze. His entire life had been built on distance, on keeping emotions buried under protocol and cold precision. Yet, in that moment, he realized Ruby wasn't just another patient. She was undoing him, piece by piece, showing him a kind of courage that medicine couldn't measure. Elias and Ruby carved out stolen moments, soft and quiet, like fragile notes in a relentless song. When the ward settled into silence, he would sit by her bed, stethoscope hanging loose around his neck, listening not to her heartbeat, but to her words. She spoke of the life she dreamed of living if she survived, traveling to places her late husband had promised, planting a garden that would bloom every season, writing a book about pain and beauty coexisting in the same breath. Elias, who had spent years burying his own voice beneath clinical detachment, found himself confessing secrets he had never spoken aloud. He told her about the accident, the night he lost the only woman who ever loved him, the night that turned him into the man who treated feelings like infections to be cut away. His voice cracked in the telling, and Ruby's hand, frail but certain, reached for his. "You don't have to live numb to honor her," she whispered. "The dead don't want our silence, they want our living." Her health flickered like a candle in the wind, days of progress followed by nights of collapse. Elias began bending rules, pushing treatments that weren't sanctioned, searching journals and late-night research for anything that could give her more time. He crossed lines not just as a doctor, but as a man desperate to keep someone from slipping away again. Word spread through the hospital. Ruby's family confronted him in hushed, angry voices outside her room, accusing him of entangling himself, of confusing medicine with love. He didn't deny it because in his silence, they saw the truth. Yet neither of them pulled back. Their connection deepened in secret glances, lingering touches, and words that carried more weight than they should. To the world, Elias remained the unshakable doctor. To Ruby, he became the man who smiled again, who allowed hope to creep into his voice when he spoke of tomorrow. They were lovers in everything but name, trapped in the liminal space between duty and desire. Then the night came when the monitors screamed louder than ever before. Ruby's body gave way to a sudden storm of failure, her lungs collapsing, her heart faltering. The ER swarmed with frantic movement, nurses shouting numbers, machines spitting warnings. Elias stood at the center of it, torn between his oath and his heart. Protocol demanded one course of action. His soul demanded another. Nurses barked numbers, alarms blared, and the rhythm of Ruby's heart danced dangerously close to silence. Elias's hands moved with practiced precision, compressions, injections, orders rattled off like clockwork, but his soul was no longer detached. Every second felt like the last grain of sand in an hourglass he couldn't flip back. Her eyes fluttered open just enough to find him through the blur. Her lips parted, a whisper fighting its way out. "Don't let me go." Something shattered inside him. Protocol demanded intubation, a risky, invasive path that would keep her alive but strip away the fragile quality of life she had begged him to preserve. Yet his heart begged him to do whatever it took to hold on, to fight, even if it meant betraying the very oath that defined him. The chief physician stormed in, demanding Elias step aside. "You've crossed too many lines already, Elias. Let us handle this." But Elias's body stood firm between Ruby and the rest of the team, his eyes blazing with a conviction no superior could extinguish. "She is not a case file," he snapped. "She's a life. She's a person. And I will not let her fade without giving her every chance." Gasps rippled through the staff. It wasn't just rebellion, it was love, laid bare in front of everyone. Elias pushed the limits of medicine that night, threading hope through impossible odds, clinging to Ruby with every ounce of skill he had. Hours later, when the storm settled, she was still breathing, fragile, tethered, but alive. The room exhaled in relief, but the cost was written in stone. Elias knew he had broken rules that couldn't be unbroken. His career stood on the edge of collapse. Later, when the ER finally quieted and he sat by her bedside, her hand sought his again. Weak, trembling, but warm. Her voice, barely audible, carried a smile. "You risked everything, for me." He looked at her, the weight of his choices heavy but undeniable. "Not for you," he whispered back, his throat tight. "For us." And in that moment, the walls Elias had built his entire life crumbled. It wasn't about medicine anymore. It wasn't about reputation or rules. It was about two broken souls finding each other in the most unlikely of places. A sterile emergency room turned into the stage for a love story that shouldn't exist, yet burned brighter than anything either had known. The walls of the hospital, once his sanctuary, now felt like a prison closing in. Disciplinary hearings loomed over Elias, colleagues whispering behind closed doors, administrators condemning his choices. They called it a breach of ethics, a failure of discipline, an act of recklessness. But in the quiet of his heart, Elias knew the truth. It was the first time in years he had acted not out of cold calculation, but out of love. Meanwhile, Ruby's condition faltered again. Every chart spoke of decline, every scan of limits reached. The hospital bureaucracy began circling like vultures, ready to withdraw support for treatments deemed wasteful. Elias stood against them, relentless, a man fueled not by pride but by a promise. "She is not a lost cause," he told the board, his voice steady, his gaze unflinching. "She is the reason we practice medicine in the first place." Late one night, in the dim light of her hospital room, Elias sat at her bedside, no mask, no armor. Ruby, pale but radiant with quiet strength, looked at him with eyes that seemed to hold the entire weight of her journey. He reached for her hand, the words breaking past the walls he had held for too long. "I can't keep pretending, Ruby. I love you. More than my career, more than the fear of losing you. I love you now, in this moment, whatever tomorrow brings." Tears welled in her eyes, not from fear, but from the beauty of being truly seen. She touched his face, her fingers feather light. "Then promise me this," she whispered, her voice fragile but fierce. "Live fully. Even if I don't make it. Don't go back to hiding in your shadows. Let yourself feel, let yourself fight for life, not just for me, but for you." He nodded, his throat tight, and in that sacred silence, they promised each other what medicine could not: to cherish every heartbeat, every breath, every second that remained. Then came the miracle, not sudden, not dramatic, but steady. Day by day, Ruby's vitals strengthened, her body choosing life with the same resilience her soul had shown from the beginning. Against every chart, against every statistic, she stabilized. The hospital, once ready to write her off, stood in stunned silence. Elias had not just saved a life, he had proved that compassion, defiance, and love could change the very definition of healing. On his last day under suspension review, Elias walked her outside, into the morning light. The world beyond the hospital doors felt different, brighter. She leaned on him for balance, her hand curled in his, both fragile and unbreakable. Around them, life continued in its messy, beautiful chaos, cars honking, people rushing, the city alive. But for them, it was a new beginning. Ruby looked up at him, her smile soft but victorious. "See, we made it outside." He smiled back, a rare, unguarded warmth lighting his face. "Together." And as they walked forward, hand in hand, the storm of sirens and rules and fear fell behind. What lay ahead was uncertain, but it was theirs, two souls who had found love in the most unlikely of places, choosing hope over despair, life over survival. The hearing room was cold, sterile, lined with men and women in suits who judged lives through policies and numbers. Dr. Elias stood before them, the weight of his choices heavy but unshaken. They listed his violations one by one: unauthorized procedures, disregard for protocol, emotional compromise. Meant to strip him of everything he had built. But when asked if he regretted it, Elias simply said, "No. Because for the first time, I treated a person, not a case." Outside, in her hospital bed, Ruby fought another small battle, her heart stuttering, her breath catching, but she fought with the same fierce will she had always carried. She thought of Elias, standing alone against the machine, and she prayed not for her survival, but that he would not lose the fire she had awakened in him. When he returned to her room that evening, drained but still standing, the sight of her waiting smile nearly undid him. He sat close, his hand covering hers, trembling now not with medical precision but with vulnerability. "They may take my license, they may strip my title, but none of it matters when I'm here with you," he confessed, voice low, raw. "I love you, Ruby. More than I thought I was still capable of." Her eyes glistened with tears, her smile fragile yet radiant. "You've already given me more life than any medicine could. But Elias, listen to me, you must promise to keep living, no matter what happens. Don't go back to being a ghost in scrubs. Don't bury your heart again." He nodded, tears threatening to break through, and in that moment they made a vow, not for forever, not for guarantees, but for now, for the fragile eternity of the present. They promised to love with no hesitation, to cling to every breath like it was a gift. And then came the turn no one expected. Days later, against predictions, against statistics, Ruby's body steadied. Her fever broke. Her lungs strengthened. Tests began to tell a new story, one of resilience, of survival. The same administrators who condemned Elias now whispered about miracles, about outcomes science alone could not explain. The day she was discharged, the world outside felt unreal, dazzling. Elias walked beside her, his hand firmly in hers, as they pushed through the sliding glass doors into open air. The sky stretched wide, the city alive, every sound to him, to the life they had fought for. Ruby leaned into him, her voice soft but steady. "We made it out." He smiled, for the first time unburdened, eyes fixed on the horizon. "Together. Always."